All right, let's get into William Faulkner's Light in August. This is a story where a single, whispered secret can absolutely destroy a life, and where the past, well, the past is never really past. We're going to see how one woman's simple search for her lover crashes headfirst into a town's dark history of violence and hate. So, picture this. Our story kicks off with a young woman named Lena Grove. She's 20, she's very pregnant, and she's walked all the way from Alabama to Mississippi. Why? She's looking for the father of her baby. And she's got this incredible, almost unshakable sense of optimism, which is a pretty stark contrast to the world she's about to step into. And just as Lena gets to the town of Jefferson, the first thing she sees isn't the man she's looking for. Nope, it's a huge column of smoke rising into the sky. A house is on fire. And it just so happens to belong to a woman the town has completely rejected. You can already tell this fire is way more than just an accident. It's a sign of a town's simmering anger and secrets. So you've got this hopeful journey on one hand, and a violent fire on the other. They seem like they're from two different stories, right? Well, in Jefferson, they are absolutely connected. They're two ends of the same tangled thread. So let's pull on that thread and see how it unravels a story of murder, identity, and obsession. Okay, so Lena starts asking around for a guy named Lucas Birch, but instead, she finds Byron Bunch, a quiet, predictable guy who works at the local mill, and her arrival just completely throws his life into a spin. He's instantly taken with her calm and her determination. So Byron tells her, yeah, the guy you're looking for, Lucas Birch, he's here, but now he calls himself Joe Brown. And then, almost as an afterthought, Byron mentions Brown's coworker from the mill, this dark, quiet, kind of scary guy named Joe Christmas. And that name, Joe Christmas, that's the one that's going to blow all of this town's secrets wide open. To really understand that fire, we have to understand the man who was living in the house. So we're going to hit pause on Lena's story for a little bit and step back into the long, dark shadow of Joe Christmas's past. You know, his whole story really starts with his name, Joe Christmas. Why? Because he was found as a baby on the steps of an orphanage on Christmas Day. Right from that very first moment, his identity was something that was given to him, not something he owned. His entire life just became this violent, desperate search for who he was even supposed to be. And look at this timeline. Everything hinges on a single moment when he's just 5 years old. He accidentally sees the orphanage dietitian with a doctor, and to silence him, she whispers this secret to him that he has Black ancestry. Now, in the segregated South, that's not just a piece of information, it is a brand. It's a curse. And that follows him into a really brutal childhood with a religious fanatic for a foster father. And it all ends in a violent escape into a life on the run. And you can really see the clash right here. On one side, you have his adoptive father, McEachern, trying to beat religion and obedience into him. On the other side, you have Christmas secretly rebelling against every single rule. It was like a pressure cooker. For every prayer McEachern forced on him, Christmas found a new way to defy him, until that final day when he knocked his foster father out with a chair and just ran. Now, believe it or not, Joe Christmas isn't the only ghost haunting this town. There's another key figure, Reverend Gale Hightower. He just sits at his window all day, watching the town that threw him out years ago. And even though he seems like he's just a spectator, his own past is tangled up in all the violence that's about to happen. So, just like Christmas, Hightower is a man totally trapped by the past. The difference is, his prison isn't a secret. It's this romantic, over-the-top obsession with his grandfather, who was a Confederate soldier. It's the reason he came to Jefferson, and you'll see, it's the reason his life fell apart. Yeah, this guy didn't show up in Jefferson to preach about God. He came to preach about his dead grandpa's ghost. His sermons were all about charging horses and cavalry, and the townspeople, well, they hated it. He was so lost in his obsession that he completely ignored his wife. Her loneliness led to affairs and a scandalous death in another city, which finally gave the town the excuse it needed to kick him out of the church. So now he just sits and watches. Okay, so we've got all the pieces on the board. Lena's hope, Christmas's rage, and Hightower's regret. Now, we bring it all back to the present, because all of these separate lives are about to come crashing together. The stage is set for a murder that's going to rip this town apart. So where does Joe Christmas land after years of wandering? Of all places, he ends up living in a cabin on Joanna Burden's property. And guess what? She's another town outcast, hated for generations because her family were abolitionists. You couldn't write a more volatile setup.
A man who is secretly tortured by the idea that he might be part Black, living with a woman who is publicly hated for supporting Black people. It's a recipe for disaster. And their relationship? Whoa. It is just this toxic, destructive spiral of passion and hate. Things just keep escalating until Joanna tries to force him to pray, to repent, to become one of us. For a guy who has fought against being controlled his entire life, that is the last straw. When she comes at him with an old pistol, he reacts with a razor. He kills her. And with that act, he lights the fuse that burns through Jefferson. And then this happens. The town offers a $1,000 reward for the killer. Now, for a guy like Joe Brown, who's lazy, greedy, and couldn't care less about anyone but himself, this isn't a tragedy. This is a winning lottery ticket. And he knows exactly who he's going to blame to cash in. So what does Joe Brown do? He doesn't even think twice. He runs straight to the sheriff, sells out his supposed partner, and makes up a story that points the finger squarely at Joe Christmas. And once he tells them about Christmas's supposed racial background, the manhunt is on, and the outcome is pretty much a foregone conclusion. So after about a week on the run, Christmas basically lets himself get caught in a nearby town. His capture is a huge spectacle the whole town comes out to see. But the real story isn't the capture. It's this old couple in the crowd, the Hines. They've been watching this whole thing unfold, and they are holding on to the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. And here it is, the truth. And it is absolutely horrific. Mrs. Hines screams that Joe Christmas is her grandson. Turns out, her fanatical husband, Doc Hines, murdered the baby's father just because he thought the man was part Black. He then stood by and let his own daughter die giving birth. And then, he was the one who took the baby and left him on the orphanage's steps. The man who created all of Joe Christmas's pain was his own grandfather. So with that bombshell dropped, the whole story just barrels toward its violent ending. All the secrets are out in the open, now it's just about the consequences. Everyone's fate is about to be sealed.
So let's talk about the two escapes. Joe Brown, the man Lena was looking for, finally sees her and his newborn baby. And he panics. He literally jumps out a window and runs for a train, escaping all responsibility. At the same time, Joe Christmas also makes a run for it. But he's not running from responsibility, he's running from a lynch mob. One man escapes to get away with it all. The other runs toward a brutal, certain death.
So here's how it all shakes out. Joe Christmas is caught, he's shot, and he's castrated by a racist fanatic. A final, horrific act of forcing an identity onto him. Joe Brown, the man who betrayed him, just vanishes on a train. But, and this is a big but, out of all this darkness, there is this one little flicker of light. Lena Grove and her baby leave Jefferson, with Byron Bunch right beside them. Her story, which started everything, is the one that continues, offering this small, fragile hope for a new beginning.
And that's really the question the book leaves us with, isn't it? Can you ever truly get away from the story that other people have decided is yours? For Joe Christmas, the answer was a violent, tragic no. But then you have that final image of Lena and Byron walking down a new road. And in that, Faulkner leaves us with this tiny, stubborn glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, for some people, a new story is possible.